It was a freezing February night in upstate New York. Snowflakes swirled in the wind, settling over a quiet strip mall in the small town of Orchard Park. Inside one of the units, a modest television studio lined with bright posters and soft studio lights, two people stood on the brink of an ending. On paper, they were a power couple. He, a charismatic businessman from Pakistan. She, an architect with a sharp mind and a warm smile. Together, they had built America's first English-language Muslim television network, a dream born in the wake of 9/11, a vision of countering stereotypes and celebrating community. But dreams can hide nightmares. Behind the glossy photos, the awards, the handshakes with community leaders was a marriage on the brink of catastrophe. What happened next that chilly Friday would shock the nation, ignite debates about culture and religion, and leave an entire community questioning how well they really knew the people they celebrated. This is the story of Aasiya Zubair. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Aishwarya.
And I'm Aryan.
And the case that we have for you today is so violent, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it ever since I heard of it. Aryan, we're in kind of a unique setup today. This is a little bit different, right?
I would argue much better also to be able to record a Desi Crime episode without being in close proximity to you.
Funny, that's what I was going to say. It's so much easier when I can just mute him, guys. And that's an option all of you have all the time, by the way.
We are in this setup to experiment how we can accommodate all our travel shenanigans and still provide Desi Crime episodes to you. But the Desi Crime team is off this week. It's a 9-10 day long break and we're all traveling. But we thought because you need your dose of Desi Crime, we will record one remotely for you. I'm in my house in Bombay recording this. But because we put in so much effort for you guys to give you episodes even while we're vacationing, the least you can do is buy the one and only, the Desi Crime book. For those of you who don't know, and I'm kind of surprised if you don't know, we have a book out. And you can pre-order it right now in the link in bio. And it releases on the 19th of August. If you happen to be outside India or you just love our voices a lot, the Audible version of it, exclusively available on Audible, is narrated by yours truly, me and Aishwarya, with 2 exclusive episodes in it that haven't ever been covered on the podcast before. So if you want the audiobook and you want the physical book, as you should, head to the links in the description. And with that, Aishwarya, on with the case for today, one that takes us all the way to New York.
February 13th, 2009, 1:07 a.m. Pakistan Standard Time. It's a Friday, the kind of Friday that turns into Saturday when sleep refuses to come. The televisions in bedrooms across Pakistan are turned to an endless loop of breaking news. All channels are flashing the same headline. A turboprop plane, Continental Flight 3407, has crashed into a suburb of Buffalo, New York.
Tonight, investigators are focusing their attention on the actions of the crew operating Flight 3407.
The same burning fuselage, the same speculation about snow and pilot error, the same shrill sounds across the screen. It's the kind of night when you feel like nothing worse could happen. But then, Mary Travers Murphy's cell phone rings. Mary is the town supervisor of Orchard Park, the sleepy Buffalo suburb where nothing ever happens. She's been fielding calls from reporters all evening because of the plane crash. This call, she thinks, will be more of the same. But it isn't. On the other end of the line is the Orchard Park police chief. Quote, Mo Hassan just walked into the station, he tells her. He says his wife is dead, end quote. Mo was the affectionate nickname of Muzammil Saeed Hassan, a prominent New York banker turned television network founder of Bridges TV. Mary paused, expecting to hear that Aasiya Zubair, Mo's wife of 9 years and the co-founder of Bridges TV, had a heart attack or an accident. Instead, the chief's voice drops. He tells her, almost whispering, that they found Aasiya's body at her and her husband's television studio. He can't bring himself to use the word decapitated, but Mary senses the enormity of what he's about to say. In the background, news anchors drone on about the plane crash, oblivious that another tragedy has just erupted in their backyard. That moment, that one phone call in the middle of chaos, would soon become as notorious as the crash itself. Within hours, Aasiya Zubair's name would be splashed across global headlines. But to truly understand the story of this day and of this couple, we need to go back in time to 1964, when Mo Hassan was born, tipping the dominoes that would end Asia's life decades later. Muzammil Saeed Hassan's story began in 1964 in Lahore, Pakistan. The details of his childhood are hazy, pieces of a puzzle rather than a full picture, but what is clear is that by the time he was 17, he had set his eyes on something much bigger than the streets he grew up on. That year, he left Pakistan for the United States, chasing the same dream so many others before him had crossed oceans for, a dream of success, security, and reinvention. He enrolled at the University of Rochester School of Business, where ambitions seemed to seep from his every move. In 1996, he graduated with an MBA and a growing reputation for sharp intellect and persuasive charm. By the early 2000s, he was thriving in the banking world, working at HSBC, where colleagues described him as a man who could sell an idea to anyone who would listen. But outside of conference rooms and client meetings, a darker pattern was already forming. In the 1980s, Mo married a woman named Janice. They had 2 children together, Michael and Sonia. But behind closed doors, Janice would later claim their home was anything but safe. She described him as controlling, violent, and volatile. Their marriage unraveled in divorce, shadowed by allegations of abuse. Mo married again, this time to a woman named Sadia, and again the pattern repeated. Sadia later told a journalist about one moment burned into her memory, Mo pushing her out of a moving car. She also said he once demanded she let him claim he was the one being abused, a calculated ploy to secure both legal residency and a divorce on his own terms. Friends and family recalled her speaking of beatings, humiliation, and threats that made her fear for her life. Court documents filed years later would state plainly what the woman had lived through. Both of Mo's previous marriages had ended because of, quote, severe domestic abuse. But by the 1990s, Mo Hassan was single again, rebuilding his life one step at a time in the United States.
Actually, okay, just want to wrap my head around something. Assia, who we were talking about in the beginning, is his third wife.
Correct.
Janice and Sadia, if I'm getting those names correctly, are his first and second wife. So this dude is clearly not somebody who is either meant for commitment or is the problem himself.
Absolutely, and both of his first marriages, like I said, ended with both those first 2 wives saying that there was severe domestic abuse. He's now single, it's the 1990s, and now is when he's going to meet his third wife, who's Assia, who we began the case with. Behind Mo are 2 failed marriages and a trail of allegations he never addressed publicly. Ahead of him, at least in his own mind, was the possibility of a fresh start. He joined Yahoo Personals under the screen name Muzammil, crafting a profile that painted him as a devout Muslim man in search for a like-minded partner.
Ash, what is Yahoo Personal?
Yahoo Personals, this is really funny, was a dating service, an online dating platform by Yahoo, and it was huge apparently in the late 1990s. It began in the US, then it spread to all across Europe in like the early 2000s. Never heard of this before. Like I've heard of stuff like Match.com and whatnot. Yahoo Personals, never heard of it. If we have anyone who's used Yahoo Personals ever or who knew it was a thing, please let us know what it was like. I have absolutely no clue. Half a world away though, in Karachi, Pakistan, a young woman named Aasiya Zubair was immersed in her architecture studies. Born on June 17, 1972 to a respected Pakistani family, she was ambitious, bright and determined to design skyscrapers that would leave her mark on the world. But her vision extended beyond blueprints and skylines. She wanted to bridge her faith with the wider world, to be a part of something that uplifted her community. By the year 2000, yearning for a partner to accompany her in her journey through life, in an unusually bold step for a conservative young woman, Assia logged on to the internet to search for a life partner. That search led her to Mo. Their online courtship was quick, intense, and filled with grand promises. Mo praised her education, her modesty, her commitment to serving the Muslim community. He told her about his vision for a Muslim-run television channel in America, one that could change the rising tide of post-9/11 Islamophobia and present Muslims in a positive light. He said he needed a partner with not just faith, but with business acumen and emotional strength. Assia, who had always dreamed of using her talents to build something meaningful, was drawn in. Within months, they were married in an Islamic ceremony in 2000, and Assia left Karachi for the United States.
Ash, so the inception of this relationship was online, correct?
Yep, correct.
And in the mid 1990s, they meet on Yahoo Personal, Yahoo Me, Yahoo Hinge, whatever that is. And there are a few years of this online dating, apparently long distance, and then they get married without ever having, lived in person together.
That's kind of what it seems like. We don't have all of the accounts, so whether he came and visited her, whether she ever went there, we don't know any of that. What we do know is they kind of met at some point in the late 1990s. By October of 2000, they were married, and they were married in a ceremony, a fairly large ceremony in Pakistan, for which Mo had flown down. After that happened, we know that Assia moved to New York to be with him there permanently. From the outside, it seemed like the perfect marriage and the perfect couple. Mo and Assia settled together in a beautiful two-story home in Orchard Park, which is one of Buffalo's wealthiest suburbs. Their blended household included most children from his previous marriages and eventually 2 more children together. They attended the local mosque together, hosted dinners for neighbors, and became the kind of couple local media loved to profile: articulate, polished, and committed to reshaping the narrative about Muslim Americans. In 2004, they brought Mo's dream to life, launching Bridges TV, the first English-language Muslim television network in the United States. Its mission statement was clear: to counter negative stereotypes of Muslims and show the diversity of Muslim American life. Assia was the vice president, shaping programming and direction. Mo was the charismatic CEO, selling the vision to investors. The Council on American Islamic Relations celebrated their work, honoring them with awards for what many saw as groundbreaking community service. But the vision was broader than that. Mo and Assia wanted to invite in non-Muslim audiences too, those curious enough to learn about a community they rarely saw represented beyond the headlines. In interviews, their enthusiasm was magnetic. They spoke about their mission with the kind of optimism that made people believe. The network was hailed as a breakthrough. In the years after 9/11, American news cycles had often flattened Muslims into one-dimensional figures: suspects, threats, others. Mo and Assia set out to rewrite that narrative. Their network aired cooking shows, children's programs, documentaries, and interactive call-in segments where imams fielded questions about marriage, finances, and faith. They launched a sitcom, Calling Home, about a Pakistani-American family trying to balance tradition with modern life. News anchors like Naeema Hassan wore headscarves without having to explain them, delivering headlines without being reduced to a token. They secured a place on Dish Network, grew an audience in tens of thousands. Quote, "We want to depict Muslims as full human beings, not as stereotypes," Assia told one reporter. Their motto, connecting people through understanding, was more than a slogan. They hosted interfaith forums, spotlighted Muslim women running businesses, profiled American Muslims serving in the military. On camera, Assia was composed, approachable, her tailored suits and hijab framing a warm smile. Many saw her as the network's heart. She once said she wanted to, quote, "shine a light on the joy and compassion in Islam," end quote, because she was tired of seeing her faith reduced to violence and fear. On camera, the couple were the picture of unity, holding hands, exchanging warm glances, smiling wide for the world to see. A modern Muslim power couple breaking barriers together. But away from the bright studio lights and carefully staged photo ops, the story was far from perfect. Behind the closed doors of their Orchard Park home, the image began to fracture. It didn't take long after the wedding for the man who had charmed Assia from across an ocean to disappear. In his place emerged someone darker, someone her friends and family would later say was obsessed with control. According to those closest to her, Mo monitored Asia's every move. He listened in on her phone calls, read her emails, dictated how money in the house was spent. He demanded her passwords, and when she resisted, he took them by force. With them, he impersonated her in her messages to her lawyer and psychologist. He even wrote letters under the guise of his own mother, praising him while painting Assia as domineering and unstable. He drilled her on what to say if the police or child protective services ever came to the door, forcing her to memorize scripts that cast him as a devoted husband and father. And when she resisted him, the threat was always the same. If she ever left, he would take the children. In her personal logs, she wrote of being deprived of sleep, of being woken by bright lights or shrill alarms until she agreed to whatever he wanted. of being forced to sign memos giving him permission to punish her if she ever contacted the police or social services, of hearing him threaten in a voice she knew was capable of carrying it out that he would, quote, take the children, burn them, and bury them where she would never find them if she disobeyed. She wrote of being shoved, punched, and having objects hurled at her, only for him to tell her it was her fault. If she cried, he would sneer, "You're weak, you're selfish, you lack sabr," patience, twisting a virtue her faith cherished into a weapon to keep her silent. There were moments of violence that etched themselves into her body, locked in their bedroom while he sat on top of her until she agreed she was mentally ill, dragged down the driveway and pinned to the ground after telling him she wanted to keep their unborn child, beaten until she agreed to an abortion, only to miscarry weeks later. There was the time he punched her nose over and over until blood streamed down her face, then forbade her from seeking medical care. For a week she hid indoors, the bruises on her face bearing the shape of his fists.
Ash, it might be conditioning, and it might be sort of the male perspective. I don't know what I can blame on this, but when somebody says domestic abuse, there is an image or a notion that props up in your head. And it is not one as adverse as what you've described. And we've covered cases on Desi crime like Chamari Lianage and others where an act could be described as domestic abuse. But if I were to describe it, it is psychopathic torture and assault, repetitive assault. Domestic abuse seems to placate that to something more diminished. And maybe I was wrong in assuming, there were fights when you said. I thought, there was a couple that fought. Especially because he broke up with two of his previous wives because of domestic abuse. This is not what I had in mind when you said that.
I think that is so true. It's so common to hear domestic abuse. And us in South Asia are so conditioned to know that it's happening across homes, possibly in our own families, possibly in families that are very, very close to us, familiarly speaking, that we think it's a man who's loud. It's a man who'll break a glass, It's a man who'll punch a wall. It's a man who'll stop the car, get out, let you sit in the car after dinner because he's angry. This doesn't come to mind. I don't know why. And I think it's only after covering all of these cases at Desi Crime that I realize this abuse is so vicious. We don't hear about this enough. It's crazy. Then there were all of the times she tried to flee, only for him to chase her and ram her car off the road. The countless days he ransacked their home, smashing furniture and appliances until she stopped replacing them altogether, knowing they would be destroyed again. And Assia wasn't the only one living in fear. The children had their own catalogue of horrors, watching their father smash doors with baseball bats, rip televisions from walls, and punch holes straight through drywall. They saw what his rage could do. Once, after a beating so vicious it left him shaken, Mo's teenage son confided to a friend, "My father will kill us one day." Child Protective Services came knocking more than once, responding to repeated complaints. But Mo was calculated. He hid the bruises, rehearsed Assia into compliance. Over and over, he made her repeat the same lines. "I am not an abused wife. My husband is good. We are just under stress." Any deviation from the script was met with insults, crazy, psycho, and threats to have her committed to a mental institution. Later in court, prosecutors would bring forward the emails and diary entries that backed up every one of these stories. And then comes the question we've all been conditioned to ask. Across so many Desi Crime episodes, the single greatest truth that has emerged is that for victims of domestic abuse, leaving is the scariest option of all. Assia knew this. This was the most dangerous move. The times she tried, Mo hunted her down. He chased her on highways, rammed her car, called immigration to threaten her visa status, and even enlisted members of their own community to pressure her into returning. Her sister Asma would later tell reporters that Assia was financially dependent and terrified of raising 3 children alone in a country that was not her own. She feared what Mo might do to their children if she left them in his custody. And perhaps most tragically, she wanted to believe change was possible. Time after time, Mo dangled that hope in front of her. Therapy, repentance, transformation. The promises came easily. He even wrote letters to imams admitting to anger issues and asking for guidance, though the blame always landed back on Assia for provoking him. The cycle became predictable. A violent eruption, followed by tears and apologies, vows to do better, a fleeting claim, and then another eruption. Survivors around the world know this pattern well. Hope, fear, despair. For Assia, there was no safety inside their home, and yet in public, the illusion remained untouched. The smiling couple, the model family, the success story, and their biggest success, their television network. But behind closed doors, that too was beginning to falter. Mo's behavior was shifting professionally too. He grew paranoid, short-tempered. Rating dips triggered tirades. He berated staff for minor mistakes, accused his wife for working against him. In one 2008 staff meeting, he exploded at an intern over the wrong coffee order and then fired her on the spot. Employees later told investigators they had noticed the bruises on Asia's arms and neck, but said nothing, afraid of crossing him. In quiet moments with a female colleague, Assia confessed that she hid her makeup bag because Mo accused her of trying to seduce other men if he saw lipstick. She wore the same plain outfits on camera because anything brighter, sharper would provoke him. She joked about it to keep the conversation light, but the exhaustion in her eyes told the truth to everyone around. As Bridges TV gained recognition, Mo expanded his reach, networking with political figures, religious leaders, activists across the country. In 2007, CARE honored both Mo and Assia for creating a platform where Muslim stories could be told. On stage, during his acceptance speech, he called Assia, quote, his beloved wife, his rock. The applause swelled, even though just 2 weeks earlier, he had punched his rock so hard that her eye turned black. The accolades did nothing to ease the pressure. Advertising revenues were patchy. They leaned on savings and loans from friends to keep the lights on. Mo began to pin the network's struggles on Assia, accusing her of incompetence. She responded by working longer hours, chasing investors and applying for grants. She also began taking MBA classes, hoping education might give her the tools to leave him and the strength to run the network on her own. It gave her hope. But for Mo, it only fed the insecurity already festering. By the end of 2008, Assia knew she could no longer survive in her own house. Quietly, methodically, she began building her case for a divorce. Photographs of her face filled with bruises, snapshots of splintered furniture, copies of the scripts Mo had forced her to memorize, police reports filed during the rare slivers of time when she could reach for help. She confided in her sister Asma and in a handful of trusted friends. She told them plainly she was leaving. In early February 2009, she made her move. She left the marital home, taking the children with her and settling into a separate house. By this point, in early 2009, Assia had documented everything she had experienced in a 21-page divorce affidavit, page after page of detail that stripped away any lingering illusion of their perfect marriage. Her name was still on the lease for the Bridges TV studio, so she insisted Mo vacate the premises or work elsewhere when she needed to film. On February 6th, she filed for divorce, citing violence and inhumane treatment, and secured an order of protection that barred him from coming to her home or contacting her outside of work. For the first time in years, there was a small, fragile space in which she could breathe. But anyone who works with survivors knows, leaving is not the end of the story. It's often the most dangerous chapter of all. Mo couldn't accept it. In his mind, her decision to leave was more than rejection. It was humiliation, an assault on the control he had built his identity around. In the days leading up to the murder, he called her incessantly, banged on her door, smashed the windows at her home, and left voicemails that swung wildly from pleading to threatening, all of which violated that protection order. He told friends she was, quote, mentally ill and that he feared for his life, trying to recast himself as the victim. And then, on February 12, 2009, 2 days before Valentine's Day, he bought 2 hunting knives. That day, the 12th, was a cold Thursday. Heavy snow fell over Buffalo in the early hours, dusting roads and rooftops. Snowflakes spiraled through the air, settling in thin layers on the flat roof of a faceless industrial building in Orchard Park, the strip mall studio of Bridges TV. Schools had stayed open. Assia drove her children to a class, then to a friend's house for a playdate. That afternoon, she sat in a cafe with her laptop, working through her divorce paperwork. Later, she returned home, made dinner, and played with the kids a bit. All week, she had been careful, staying in public spaces, keeping friends updated on her movements. But that evening, she needed to make one stop: the Bridges TV studio, while Mo was there. She had clothes there to collect and a set of keys and some of their children's things to drop off. She also had some divorce details to go over with Mo. It was part of her effort to keep boundaries clear, to make sure she and Mo could avoid each other while still managing the network they had built. She told her sister Asma she would meet Mo at the station because she didn't want him anywhere near her new home. The plan was simple: keep the meeting brief, the children waiting safely in the van. Asma could hear the wariness in her voice, the quiet edge of fear. She even overheard her sister telling Mo on the phone, "We can discuss it tomorrow," a plea begging him to stay calm. Before hanging up, Assia told Asma she loved her and promised she would call the next morning. That call never came. At around 5 p.m., Assia drove to the studio in her tan minivan. In the back seat were her two youngest children, a 9-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl, buckled into their seats, unaware of what was about to unfold. She carried a plastic laundry basket in her arms as she walked into the studio she had poured the last few years of her life into. Unbeknownst to Assia, Mo had been prepared for her arrival. Just an hour earlier, at 4 p.m., he went to a local hunting store and purchased 2 razor-sharp knives. From there, he drove to the Bridges TV studio ahead of her and slipped into a darkened hallway to wait. As she stepped inside the studio, the door clicked shut behind her. She set the laundry basket she was carrying on the floor and began walking inside. Surveillance cameras tracked her down a narrow corridor lined with posters, Muslim families smiling beneath bright lights. At the far end, a figure emerged from behind a column. It was Mo. The next few minutes went by like seconds. In Mo's hands were 2 freshly purchased hunting knives, each about 20 centimeters long. He lunged. Assia raised her arms, instinctively trying to shield her face, but the blades found their mark again and again. Not once, not twice, not thrice, not even 10 times, 41 times. He stabbed her 41 times. One pierced her windpipe. According to prosecutors, the entire attack was caught on the studio's surveillance cameras. In the footage, Asia's hands flail as she tries to block the blows. She stumbles backwards and then collapses. Mo keeps stabbing, the knife flashing under the harsh fluorescent lights. Within seconds, her body goes still. Then he switched to the larger knife of the two, the one with the serrated edge. That's when the stab stopped and he instead started sawing through her neck. The sound of metal against bone was faint, swallowed by the steady hum of the studio's equipment. 37 seconds of sawing. I want us to, right at this moment, have just 10 seconds of silence, because 37 seconds, when we say it out loud like that, doesn't feel like a lot at all. It's not even a full minute after all. But these 10 seconds will make you realize just how long 37 seconds of sawing through someone's neck is. "37 seconds later, her head was completely severed, no longer attached to her body. 37 seconds later, Assia was no more. Outside in the cold, her children were still waiting in the van. They played with toys, the radio turned to a children's station, unaware of the horror unfolding just beyond the walls. 10 minutes later, Mo emerged. His clothes were stained with blood. He had placed Asia's head in a plastic bag and left it beside her body. At a sink, he washed his hands, then walked out to his vehicle and drove to the Orchard Park police station. Approaching the front desk, he almost casually told the officer on duty, "My wife is at our TV station and she's dead." Mo told the police he felt relief after killing her, comparing it to being, quote, liberated from an Al-Qaeda training camp, end quote. The shock of that statement would ripple through the community for months. He offered nothing more. He didn't say he had decapitated her, turning their studio, their shared dream, into her tomb. He then sat down, crossed his legs, and waited for the arrest. When officers arrived at the studio, they found a scene that would stay with them. It was almost surreal. Detectives in blue gloves moved carefully through the studio, collecting evidence among overturned chairs and pools of splattered blood. They found the 2 hunting knives, the receipts showing they had been bought only hours earlier, and the surveillance footage that captured the assault from start to finish. On a table, Asia's hijab lay folded neatly, untouched by blood. Her head was found beside her body. Above her desk, a plaque from the Council on American Islamic Relations honored Assia and Mo for, quote, championing positive portrayals of Muslims, end quote. The irony was almost too much to bear. Outside the studio, Asia's friends wept. Inside the van, her children waited, still strapped in their seats, until a social worker finally came to take them away. The decapitation was not frenzied. To the officers on site, it looked deliberate. Detective Jeffrey Cox later testified that the cuts were, quote, precise and intentional. Prosecutors argued that Mo had taken care not to damage Asia's face so her mother could view her one last time. It was a macabre gesture rooted in warped logic, one Mo would later explain to a psychologist as, quote, the most honorable way to punish a disobedient wife, end quote. Muslim scholars would go on to reject the claim outright, pointing to Islamic law's absolute prohibition on domestic violence and murder, stating a verse from the Quran which says, quote, whoever kills a soul, it is as if he has slain mankind entirely, end quote. Mo's actions were not about faith, they were about control. And then, within hours, word of the killing spread. Local newsrooms, still covering the nearby plane crash, pivoted to the new horror. The juxtaposition, a crash and a beheading, read like the setup to a nightmare. Reporters gathered outside the station as Mo was led out in handcuffs, his face blank. Neighbors voiced disbelief. The Buffalo Muslim community was stunned. Many had seen Assia and Mo as trailblazers, a couple who had given their community a voice in national media. He was such a nice guy, said one neighbor, echoing the tired refrain that services whenever a hidden abuser is unmasked. Others remembered the flashes of his temper. He could be charming, but he had a dark side, a former colleague said. At a local mosque, more than 200 people gathered for a prayer service. Many wept openly. The Imam reminded the congregation that domestic violence is forbidden in Islam. He quoted the Prophet Muhammad, quote, the best of you are those who are best to your families, end quote. He urged men to examine their hearts, to protect the women in their lives. Khalid Qazi, head of the Muslim Public Affairs Council of Western New York, told reporters that domestic violence is, quote, despicable and Islam condones it in no way, end quote. From this tension, a national campaign called Imams Speak Out emerged. It urged imams across the country to devote at least one Friday sermon to the issue of domestic violence. Another initiative, Purple Hijab Day, encouraged Muslim women to wear purple headscarves, a color of remembrance for victims and a symbol of the fight against abuse. Activist groups like Turning Point and the Peaceful Families Project organized workshops on healthy relationships determined to turn grief into prevention. Meanwhile, online forums and talk radio lit up with a single phrase, honor killing. Commentators insisted her murder was rooted in cultural or religious codes that condone killing women for disobedience. Anti-Muslim activists seized on the case, using it to portray Islam as violent. But others pushed back hard. This was not an honor killing, they said. It was domestic violence, the same cycle of abuse that devastates families across the United States.
I'm so glad you bring this up, Aishwarya, because I know for a fact, even for this case, this video will draw so many people here to watch this that are maybe here for the wrong reasons or come with their own biases. Because whenever we cover a case that pertains to a certain community, whether ethnic or religious, people who are bigoted against that community will fill our comments with how it's that community's fault this has happened. While they won't realize that we have covered n number of cases of the same type from their community. And this happens across the board. There is no one religious group or ethnic group that does this. All of them do it. And the extremists of all sort of wager in their notions in the comments. My only thing to them and to people listening is domestic abuse has nothing to do with religion. Domestic abuse is found in all religions and in all ethnicities. This happened not because of a specific religion, and that's just something we need to be mindful of. It happens because of a culture that may overlap with religion, but the culture is the issue, and this culture is omnipresent across South Asian societies, whatever the religion may be. And that's something I want to drill home. We don't condone some of the comments you might see on this video also saying, oh, this happens because they're that people. No, this happens because we as a society, especially in South Asia, are desensitized to domestic violence. Ask women in violent relationships in India today, women who've been in marriages for 20 plus years, women who are beaten up, you ask them, are you domestically abused? Are you a victim of domestic abuse? And they would say no. Because half the times, they don't even know they don't deserve to be hit. Because just of the lack of awareness and the cultural problem we have fostered. So Just something I would like to point out for people who might want to start playing a blame game in the comment section.
Absolutely, and it kind of reminds me of the Kiranjit Ahluwalia case, That case became a trailblazer in the West for what were predominantly white cases of white victims of domestic abuse. And I have a list of other cases I mentioned that because of Kiranjit's, incredible courage of speaking out, of fighting for justice, that she went on to influence and have a positive impact on. It's this long list of all white women abused by all white Christian husbands. And so, yeah, it just reminds me of that. This is multifaceted, this is multicultural, this crosses boundaries. It has so much more to do with than this. Activists across the country chimed in too. To call it an honor killing, activist Sarah Saeed argued, was to exoticize a crime that in truth mirrored the epidemic of domestic abuse in America. But in one of the most heartwarming moments of this case, Mary Travers Murphy, the Orchard Park town supervisor who had received the call from the local inspector informing her of the murder, went on to establish a satellite office of the Family Justice Center in Orchard Park. The center offers victims legal assistance, counseling, safety planning, and connections to shelters. Mary later said she was haunted by Asia's death and channeled her grief into a mission to help other survivors. Since 2009, the FJC has served thousands of clients, many of whom credit the center with saving their lives. As days passed, family and friends arrived in New York to say one final goodbye to Assia. Her sister Asma flew in from Pakistan to attend the funeral. She told reporters that she had spoken to Assia on the day of the murder, hearing her urge Mo to calm down. At first, Asma believed her sister had been shot. When she learned the truth that Assia had been decapitated, she collapsed. She remembered the bruises, the times she had helped her sister hide in a locked bathroom while Mo pounded on the door, the nights they whispered over the phone about escape plans. And she remembered the silence, not just hers, but the community's. Quote, "The community gave Mo too many chances," she said, her voice breaking. "We all kept quiet. We're all guilty as well." Those who couldn't travel to New York mourned in their own cities and countries. In Karachi, Asia's hometown, the mourning was just as deep. Women's rights groups like the Aurat Foundation pointed out that domestic violence cuts across every social class and urged the government to pass stronger protection for women. Newspapers printed tributes to Assia, remembering her as an intelligent, compassionate woman who had once designed community housing for low-income families. Her friends and family spoke of her love for architecture, her habit of reading late into the night, her dream of one day building a school for girls. They wanted her remembered not just as a beheading victim, but as a visionary. Then came the day everyone had been waiting for. After his arrest, Mo was charged with second-degree murder. Prosecutors chose not to pursue a first-degree charge, believing that proving premeditation beyond hours of planning would be difficult, even though he had purchased the knives that day. In the state of New York, second-degree murder carries a maximum sentence of 25 years to life. That's what Mo was fighting against. Mo initially pleaded not guilty and hired attorney James Harrington. But soon, his statements grew bizarre. In jailhouse interviews, he claimed he was the real victim, that Assia was mentally ill, that she had beaten him, and that he killed her in self-defense. In his closing arguments, he compared himself to Nelson Mandela, Ronald Reagan, and Mahatma Gandhi, framing his actions as the stand of a man resisting an oppressive system. It would take 3 years for the case to reach trial, delayed by legal motions and shifts in defense strategy. Then, in a dramatic twist, Mo fired his attorney and chose to represent himself. Court observers were stunned. Here was a man with no legal training, accused of one of the most shocking murders in Western New York history, deciding to cross-examine witnesses himself. Some believed he wanted to control the narrative. Others thought he aimed to intimidate Asia's family, while others yet thought he had just lost his mind. He told the judge he would argue that he was a battered spouse, an unusual defense for a man accused of decapitation. He even planned to call his own children to testify about their mother's alleged violence. But unfortunately for him, during the trial, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence. Police officers testified about past domestic calls. Doctors described treating Asia's injuries. Neighbors recounted hearing screams from the Hassan home. The prosecution played the surveillance footage of the murder, a harrowing choice meant to capture the brutality of the attack. The jury watched in silence as the 37 seconds of her head being sawed off played on courtroom video, some jurors even covering their eyes. Prosecutor Colleen Curtin Gable argued that Mo killed Assia to punish her for filing for divorce. She pointed out that he had brought the knives hours earlier, hidden at the studio, and ambushed her. She told jurors that Assia may have been conscious when he began cutting off her head. The killing, she said, was the, quote, final act of control and domination, end quote. Mo's defense for himself, on the other hand, was erratic and contradictory. He claimed post-traumatic stress disorder from his time as a banker after 9/11. He said Assia had been, quote, punching him for hours before he retaliated, a claim unsupported by any evidence. When he cross-examined his son Michael, he tried to coax him into describing his mother's temper. Michael, in tears, replied that it was his father who had been violent. At one point, Mo read a letter to the judge comparing himself to a character in A Few Good Men who confesses to a crime but insists that larger moral issues are at stake. He produced letters he had forged impersonating Assia and his mother, but the judge dismissed them as irrelevant. He refused to acknowledge the police reports and the medical records documenting years of abuse. The jury deliberated for barely an hour before returning with a surprise, surprise, guilty verdict. One juror later said there had been, quote, no question about his guilt. At sentencing, the judge called the murder the most savage he had ever seen in his career and noted Mo's complete lack of remorse. On March 9, 2011, Mo was sentenced to 25 years to life. Because New York law had eliminated parole for murderers in this category, he will most certainly spend the rest of his life behind bars. When the sentence was read, Mo smirked. Asia's family wept. They told the court they were relieved, but no sentence could bring her back. In prison, Mo has continued to cast himself as a martyr, writing blog posts railing against feminism and complaining about his treatment. He has filed multiple appeals, all denied. While technically eligible for parole in 2034, legal experts believe his release is highly unlikely. After the trial, Asia's children were sent to live with her extended family in Pakistan. They have remained largely out of the public eye, but a family friend told a reporter they are thriving, attending school, playing sports, and honoring their mother's memory by volunteering at local charities. They are living proof that life can continue after trauma. Not the same life, but a life nonetheless. Michael and Sonia, Mo's children from his first marriage, have also spoken about the toll the case took on them. Michael testified at trial, recounting his father's violence. Since then, he has become an advocate for domestic violence awareness, sharing his story at universities and community centers, warning audiences to look for signs of abuse and to intervene early. As for Bridges TV, the network died with Assia. In the months following her death, funding evaporated, staff resigned, and investors backed out, all unwilling to associate with Mo. The station eventually ceased broadcasting. Its servers, microphones, and set pieces were auctioned off to pay debts. The dreams of a mainstream Muslim network in America may one day rise again, but not under the shadow of this tragedy. Now on to the larger picture. If you're listening to this and you are in a relationship that makes you feel unsafe, please know that you are not alone and you deserve to be safe. Reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or professional. Various helpline numbers in India, Pakistan, and the US will be available in the show notes of this episode. If you're outside these countries, find a local hotline or contact an NGO. It's not your fault. You do not deserve abuse, and there is help. If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Karak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.